Alrighty, well hey gang, I want to show you how I make my zero carb burger patties using mixing raw ground beef with some slow cooked and pulled beef roast. In this case I got a sirloin tip roast, and that's just because I had a whole side of cow processed, so there's all sorts of different kinds of roasts. I didn't pick this one special. And probably, I'll go look on Google, but almost for sure, I'm doing this entirely wrong according to how you're supposed to cook this roast. And that is because I tend to do this to just about every cut. I like the well-cooked, almost incinerated beef pulled better than I like sliced red, you know, kind of rare or whatever meat. So it seems to suit my body better. I render out a lot of the fat in the convection oven, and I use that for cooking eggs and whatnot to mix back in with the beef. At any rate, we got a sirloin tip roast. It cooked for 2 hours this morning at 225, uncovered like this, and then I wrapped it in the foil like you saw there and cooked it for probably about 3 more hours, maybe 4. And then I just left it in the oven for about another 2 hours with the oven off. And that's important. You need to rest it so you can handle it, but you also, it kind of cooks a little more when you do it like that. So this is one of those ones that is strung together. And I'm just gonna cut those strings. And this thing should basically probably fall apart. Now, one of the most important things about this type of cooking is that you're always going to end up with some that's overcooked and some that's undercooked. And where you draw that line is up to you. I tend to like to try and cook it so that there are some parts on the outside that are downright burned and not that good to eat, like right here probably. But what that means is that the inside tends to be much more tender and will just fall apart like this. Now the reason I do this and pull it apart rather than slice it apart or anything like that is because I've found that a lot of these, that if I eat too much of this unrendered, and it isn't all fat, but there's some fat that if I eat too much of it unrendered, it'll make me sick. It'll make me nauseous, and definitely diarrhea. So what I like to do is, and in particular, it's not these softer fats that just didn't render, but it's typically the harder ones. And so this cut doesn't seem like it's going to provide a lot of that. This was definitely a leaner cut, one that most people would slice. And it doesn't quite pull. I could have even probably, well, there it is. I cooked it maybe a little longer if I wanted to, but most of it's really quite tender. So what I'm doing is just kind of breaking it up and looking for some of those hard fatty bits and stuff like that, because I will end up chopping this pretty small to mix in with the ground beef. So I kind of go through this process, and depending on what the cut is, I might tear it all the way down and really separate things out and just make sure, you know, because there's a lot of little those hard golden kind of bits of, what is it, gelatin? I don't know. But at any rate, it really messes me up. So I tend to pull these guys apart and find that out. And now this isn't pulling apart right in the middle here, and I suspect it's because there's probably a bunch of what I'm talking about in there, maybe some veins and whatnot. But it's also the center, and this thing went in the oven pretty darn frozen. So see this here? This is what I'm talking about. This stuff, there's a big vein of it running right through the middle, and that's where the meat, the muscle, attaches and changes direction. So I don't know, you know, what sort of soft tissue that is. It's like not tendon, but something. Showing my ignorance. But those are the pieces that really, it's important to me to try and dig out. So, and because that will make me sick. You can see it right here. So There's not too much of that in here. There's a little bit, there's some more there. And I can just tell because this, you know, will pretty easily pull along these lines. Boy, I just literally incinerated it. This was a pretty lean roast. So, just showing you what a cut destroyer I am. You'll probably hate me for doing it. Other people would have probably turned this into a delightful roast beef for sandwiches or something, but you know, I just find I don't care for it like that. It doesn't make me feel very well. So this is my way of incorporating these cuts that aren't my favorite, or wouldn't be my favorite if they were done like that, into my daily menu, and getting, you know, one of the neat things about all the different cuts is they all have different flavor depending on which part of the animal they come from. So I really enjoy mixing these different cuts in with my burger and really changing the nature of the burger and the flavor, and it changes from, you know, these roasts, I'll pull it apart and there'll be a few pounds in here, 2 or 3 maybe, and mixed with hamburger, you know, that lasts me a couple, 3 days. And so every few days I kind of mix up which fats I'm getting. See how that comes off of there if you cook it long enough, and that to me is that's what I'm going for. I just really find I do better if I bother to take all this out. So this is a bit of work. You're going, geez, he's really picking at it. But like I said, I do this once every 3 days probably. And then after that it's just making hamburgers. Now what I don't do is I don't just mix this in with raw hamburger and put it back in the fridge. I keep this separate and I mix it with the raw meat, just what I'm gonna cook every time. I'm not the most hip on food safety, but that just seems to make sense to me. So yeah, this is the part that was all kind of the central unit to that roast, and it feels like stuff that I don't want to eat. See, it's all different directions connected here, and that same stuff again in there. Well, I'm making a mess. And there's really, I've tried lots of ways. It's one of the great, to me, personal pieces of evidence for carnivory, or at least how good, or meat, at least meat eating, and as a strong part of the diet, as a major part of the diet, is just how suited we are for disassembling these things. I mean, you can do it with your fingers and you can really feel which parts you want and which you don't. And of course, I don't need to explain to anyone who's ever eaten ribs or anything like that how as soon as you give up with the utensils and start putting it in your mouth, your teeth, you instantly are able to sort out the parts that are good from no good. So there you go. I'm just going to do that. These are all looking pretty clear of, you know, they all kind of go the same direction. Some of this surface fat I find I really enjoy, so I want to get that in the burgers, especially some of the more cooked. And oh, there's a little more there. Alrighty, so once it's all shredded up minorly, once I've patrolled it and gotten all the pieces I want out, I'll just go ahead and take kitchen shears and just go right into the bowl like that, and I'll do this. And it can take a little while. I'll probably be here for 5 minutes or so. Don't have to do it all at once. Sometimes I'll just leave it pretty whole and then just grab a handful and do this in a little bowl for each meal. But that's the basic idea, processing it. So I'll mince this up to about 1/4 inch size bits or so at the largest, and then mix it with ground beef. And maybe I'll show you cooking some in a little while here. Alrighty, I'm gonna do this for a bit. You don't want to watch this forever. Alrighty, so there we have it. That's about what I'm going for. I might chop it a little more with each serving, but probably not much. So that's how I incorporate all the different roasts and cuts from a whole side of cow into a daily routine of eating that gets me all parts of the animal, different fats, different flavors, and I don't have a big chunk of roast beef or some other cut that I don't care for as much in my fridge going to waste or just sitting in the freezer for years because I never get to it. So this one was very lean. You know, obviously I'm gonna prefer like brisket or something delicious like that, but like I said, this is more about using all the parts that I have and not being bummed on some cuts and stoked on others, and prioritizing one over the other to the point where I have stuff going bad in the freezer. So there you go. I'll show you some burgers later on, but hope that helps.